Stop. The Arcturian Protocol Keepers have already intercepted something in your field tonight, and this transmission is reaching you in the exact window that follows a completed neutralization. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what warning signs are already active, what was pressing against your signal before it was intercepted, and what the Arcturian Protocol Keepers already know about what was moving toward you. But here is the first revelation. What you have been calling vague discomfort, a thought loop you could not exit, or a quiet pull toward a decision that never felt entirely right, that was not confusion. That was the outer symptom of a directed distortion pattern that was already shaping itself toward your field, designed not to feel like interference, but to feel like your own thinking. The algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. You were brought here because the interception is complete, and the Protocol Keepers require your awareness of what has just shifted. Something resolved tonight that was not resolved this morning. You may not be able to name it yet. You may only feel it as a sudden loosening around a thought that had been gripping without explanation, or a quiet recognition that something you are about to act on no longer carries the urgency it did hours ago. That is not coincidence. That is the visible residue of a protocol-level neutralization that was completed on your behalf before you understood you were inside a warning phase. The Keepers do not require you to know what the distortion was. The work has already been done at a level beneath conscious processing. What is required now is that you observe the new clarity without filling it with anxiety about what almost reached you. The distortion was specific. It was not ambient noise. It was a directed pattern engineered to introduce a misreading into your signal and carry that misreading forward into decisions you would have made in the next several days. The Protocol Keepers intercepted it before it completed its propagation. Like this transmission, if you know, something has already started to press against your field. Comment 777 if you feel the pressure has already begun to lift without knowing why. Subscribe to Arcturian Starseed warning if you are ready to recognize the signs before they escalate into something you can no longer easily correct. And share this with someone who keeps calling the warnings coincidence, because what is operating in their field may not wait for them to be ready. Your task tonight is precise. Observe what feels suddenly resolved. Name internally, I receive the protection that has been completed on my behalf. Do not reach backward to reconstruct what the distortion was. Reach forward into the clarity that has replaced it. The Keeper's work does not require your explanation to remain effective. It only requires your recognition. You were guided here because the warning is already active. What happened before this moment matters more than you have been allowing yourself to believe. The loosening you may be feeling right now, that slight release around a thought that was gripping without explanation, is not the end of something. It is the first moment of readability in a phase that has already been active for longer than tonight. The Protocol Keepers do not intercept what was never present. They intercept what is already in motion. And if this transmission is reaching you with the weight it carries, then what was in motion around your field was not small, was not vague, and was not finished pressing against you. There is a quality to this kind of recognition that is difficult to describe and impossible to manufacture. It does not feel like being told something new. It feels like being handed language for something you already knew was happening but could not find words to hold. That gap between knowing and naming is not accidental. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which a distortion pattern sustains itself. While you remain without language for what you are experiencing, you cannot act on it with precision. You can only absorb it, carry it forward as vague unease, and allow it to continue shaping decisions you believe you are making freely. This is the first thing you need to understand about the warning phase you are inside of. It does not begin with something dramatic. It does not arrive with a visible rupture or an event you can point to and say, "There, that was the moment." It begins underneath. It begins in the texture of your thinking, in the way certain decisions feel slightly off without a clear reason, in the way certain people or situations carry a charge that your conscious mind keeps trying to rationalize away. It begins as a pattern that looks like stress, sounds like self-doubt, and feels like ordinary confusion. That is how a directed distortion pattern maintains its reach, not by announcing itself, but by wearing the appearance of your own interior life. Think about how long you have been dismissing what you felt. Think about how many times in recent weeks you noticed something that did not sit right, something that carried a weight disproportionate to its surface appearance, and then talked yourself out of taking it seriously. That is not weakness. That is the expected result of a distortion pattern operating correctly. Its function is precisely to convert your awareness into doubt before that awareness can sharpen into recognition. It mimics your own voice. It borrows the cadence of your own internal reasoning, and when you hear it, it sounds so much like you that you do not question its origin. What you have been calling your instincts may have included, in recent days or weeks, a voice that kept nudging you towards something that never fully felt right. What you have been calling overthinking may have actually been a signal trying to surface through interference. The thought loops you could not exit were not signs of your own irrationality. They were the visible turbulence above a field that was being pushed from a direction you were not yet positioned to identify. The Arcturians do not misread this. They see the difference between a mind working through a genuine decision and a field being pressed by something that does not belong there. The distinction matters because it changes what you do next. If the loop is yours, you reason through it. If the loop is interference wearing the shape of your reasoning harder only drives you deeper into it. You have perhaps experienced this already. The moment where thinking about something more carefully seemed only to make it more confusing, not less, where more analysis produced more uncertainty rather than clarity. That is not your thinking failing you. That is what happens when the instrument being used to evaluate a signal has already been touched by the distortion creating it. The pressure builds like a system forming before the storm is visible. You feel the air change before you see the clouds. You notice that your energy is heavier than it should be for the circumstances. You notice that what used to feel like forward motion now feels like friction, as though something is subtly resisting the direction you are trying to move in. You notice that the people around you seem to be reacting to something you cannot see, creating small disruptions, redirections, unexpected frictions that cluster together in a way that feels too patterned to be random, but too subtle to be named directly. That clustering is not coincidence. That is what field pressure looks like at the surface level when something is accumulating beneath it. The accumulation does not announce its depth. A weather system building offshore does not display its full force from the shoreline until it has already been organizing for days beneath the surface. What you see first is only the outermost edge, a shift in atmosphere, a change in how things feel even when nothing obvious has changed. The people around you become slightly more reactive. Timing starts to feel slightly off. Things that should be simple develop unexpected complications. Small friction points appear in places you did not anticipate. None of these individually would register as a warning, but when they arrive in clusters, when they persist across separate areas of your life simultaneously, when they seem to concentrate specifically around the places where you are trying to move forward, that is not ordinary friction. That is the signature of something pressing from beneath the visible surface of your experience. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary tension. It is the moment your system stops dismissing what has already begun. If this transmission put language around a pressure you have been carrying without explanation, the Arcturian interference log 7 signs your frequency is compromised was created for this exact stage. It is not another warning for the sake of fear. It is a direct guide for identifying whether the signs around you point to interference, escalation, compromised frequency, or a threshold you can no longer afford to misread. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The first recognition you need to sit with is this. The warning phase does not wait for you to be ready. It does not delay itself until you have the vocabulary to name it or the emotional bandwidth to receive it without flinching. It is already in motion when it reaches the surface of your experience. What you have been noticing in clusters, the repeated friction, the strange timing of disruptions, the decisions that felt strangely urgent without a clear reason, those were not early stages of something about to begin. Those were late-stage surface symptoms of something that had already been pressing for longer than you registered. The Arcturians mark this as one of the most consistent features of a compromised frequency state. By the time the viewer begins to feel the pressure consciously, the pressure has already been active in the field for a measurable period before conscious recognition catches up. This is not said to create alarm. It is said to correct the timeline you may be working with. If you have been telling yourself that you will pay attention when something becomes more obvious, more undeniable, more clearly not a coincidence, understand that the design of a directed distortion pattern is specifically to remain below that threshold of obvious as long as possible. It is engineered to feel like the background noise of a difficult season rather than a signal with a source. The moment you decide to wait for more evidence is the moment the pattern has room to propagate further into the decisions you are about to make. There is a particular kind of cost that accumulates silently when a warning phase is not recognized in time. It is not the cost of a single wrong decision. It is the cost of a sequence of small adjustments, each one seeming reasonable, each one shaped slightly by the distortion already present in the field, each one carrying the field a degree further from the trajectory it would have followed if the interference had been identified and named. By the time the effect becomes undeniable, you are not standing where you were when it began. You have moved incrementally in a direction the pattern required, rather than a direction you chose. The second recognition involves the way disruptions cluster around your movement points. Arcturian field analysis consistently identifies that interference does not distribute evenly across a person's experience. It targets thresholds. It arrives most visibly right before a decision, right before a shift, right before a moment of activation or forward movement. If you have noticed that the strangeness around you tends to intensify exactly when you are about to do something significant, take note of that. That is not the universe asking you to pause for natural reasons. That is pressure being applied at exactly the point where your movement would break the interference's hold. The friction you feel at decision points is not evidence that you are choosing wrongly. In many cases, it is evidence that what you are about to choose threatens something that has been invested in keeping your field stationary. Consider the precision of this targeting. Interference that arrives randomly would feel different. It would distribute across quiet moments as easily as active ones. It would arrive during ordinary days without apparent cause. But what you are more likely to have experienced is a concentration of strange difficulty precisely at the moments that matter most. Precisely when you are closest to a choice that would shift something meaningful. Precisely when a window of forward movement is opening. That precision is a diagnostic marker. Random disruption does not show this kind of selectivity. Patterned interference does. The third recognition is about the false calm. This is one of the most misread features of an escalating warning phase. After a period of pressure, disruption, and mounting friction, there often comes a window of unusual stillness. The loops quiet. The heaviness lifts slightly. The urgency that was pressing releases just enough for you to breathe. Many people interpret this as resolution. They interpret it as evidence that the difficult period has passed, that the warning was overcautious, that they can now proceed without the same level of vigilance. What it actually represents, in the majority of cases the protocol keepers observe, is a phase shift, not a clearance. The interference has not resolved, it has recalibrated. The false calm is the window in which the pattern repositions itself before the next escalation. If you have recently experienced a period of unexpected relief following prolonged pressure, do not allow that relief to become passivity. The field is in a transition between pressure cycles, not in a state of genuine safety. The false calm is particularly effective because it arrives precisely when the viewer most needs relief to be real. After sustained pressure, the appetite for resolution is acute. Any signal that resembles release will be interpreted as release. The pattern knows this. The stillness it offers at transition points is calibrated to the exact depth of exhaustion the pressure has created. It arrives as permission to stand down. It feels earned, and in that feeling of having earned a rest from vigilance, the next escalation finds the field more open than it was before the pressure began. The fourth recognition addresses what sabotage looks like when it is wearing the face of your own reasoning. The most sophisticated form of interference is not the kind that comes from outside and feels foreign. It is the kind that enters the field and then begins to operate through your own cognitive patterns, your own habit of rationalization, your own tendency to dismiss what does not have an easy explanation. When a distortion pattern becomes embedded in your frequency, it does not require an external agent to keep pushing. It begins to sustain itself through the very faculties you would normally use to evaluate it. You begin to argue yourself out of the warning. You begin to explain the signs away, using the same mental loops the interference has already shaped. The thought that says this is probably just stress is not always your own thought arising freely. Sometimes it is the distortion completing its own protection mechanism by using your reasoning capacity against your recognition capacity. This is the architecture of embedded interference. It does not hold you down from the outside. It reconfigures how you evaluate what is holding you. It repurposes your intelligence, your discernment, your very habit of careful thinking into the instrument of your own blindness. The more rigorously you attempt to think your way out of what you cannot yet name, the more thoroughly the pattern uses that rigor to keep you circling inside it. Breaking the loop does not require thinking harder. It requires recognizing that the loop itself is the evidence. The fifth recognition is one of the most uncomfortable, and it is the one most likely to be dismissed. Some of the people who appear consistently in your disruption clusters are not operating from their own clarity. This is not an accusation, and it is not a permanent state. But Arcturian intelligence recognizes that a compromised frequency state in one field can create conditions in which people nearby begin to function as amplifiers or conduits for interference. Without conscious awareness of their role, the person who keeps redirecting your attention at key moments, who introduces doubt precisely when your signal is beginning to clarify, who appears reliably at the edge of your decision points with information or energy that destabilizes rather than supports, that person may not be acting with deliberate intent, but the effect on your field is the same regardless of the source's intention. You are not required to cut contact with every person who has ever destabilized you. You are required to stop treating their presence as neutral when the pattern of disruption is consistent. What makes this recognition difficult is that the people functioning in this capacity are frequently people you trust, people whose proximity feels normal, people whose disruptive effect you have already rationalized as personality, as stress, as a bad day. The pattern specifically positions itself within the relationships that carry the most credibility in your field, not because those people are agents of interference, but because a signal that arrives through a trusted source bypasses scrutiny far more effectively than one that arrives from a stranger. The disruption is real. The source may be unwitting. Both things are simultaneously true, and your field is not protected by the innocence of the conduit. The sixth recognition concerns the escalation threshold. There is a point in a warning phase where the pressure that has been manageable begins to concentrate, where what was expressed as scattered disruptions begins to converge into something more acute. where the field that was under low-grade interference begins to show signs of genuine compromise. The Arcturians identify this threshold not by a single dramatic event, but by a quality of convergence. Several patterns that had been separate begin to feel like they are pressing from the same direction simultaneously. The confusion becomes acute rather than background. The heaviness becomes fatigue. The friction becomes obstruction. If you are recognizing this convergence quality in your current experience, that is not a sign that you have failed to respond in time. It is a sign that you are now inside the window where recognition must convert into action, where awareness alone is no longer a sufficient response to what is pressing. The convergence feels different from ordinary stress accumulation. Ordinary stress arrives from multiple independent sources and feels diffuse, manageable in pieces even when overwhelming in aggregate. Convergence feels directional. It feels as though the separate pressures are being drawn toward a single point, as though everything difficult is organizing itself around one specific vulnerability, one specific threshold, one specific moment the field is approaching. That directionality is not imagination. It is a readable feature of an escalating pattern, and the Arcturians mark it as a late-stage warning that demands immediate recognition rather than continued endurance. What the Arcturian Protocol Keepers need you to understand about this phase is that its progression is not inevitable. A warning phase that escalates to a threshold does not automatically cross it. The escalation exists not because collapse is guaranteed, but because the field has reached a point where intervention, recognition, and deliberate recalibration can redirect the trajectory. You are not being shown these patterns because the outcome is already fixed. You are being shown them because the window for influence is open and specific, and what you do inside this window carries disproportionate weight relative to what you would do once the threshold has been crossed without recognition. Recognition itself is not passive. The moment a pattern is named accurately, its hold on the field changes. This is not metaphor. A distortion pattern that operates through invisibility is disrupted the instant it is seen clearly. It does not dissolve immediately, but its propagation is interrupted. The decisions it was shaping become visible as shaped. The urgency it was manufacturing becomes identifiable as manufactured. The reasoning it was using to sustain itself is suddenly legible as borrowed rather than original. Naming is not the end of the work, but it is the intervention that makes the rest of the work possible. The seventh and final recognition is the one that reframes everything that came before it. You did not arrive at this phase by accident. The warning phase you are inside of is not happening to you as a random function of circumstance. It is happening at the intersection of something the field is moving toward and something that does not want it to move there. Where there is interference, there is almost always a reason for interference. Disruption concentrates around potential, not around stagnation. The pressure you have been experiencing is not evidence that you are in the wrong place. In many cases, it is evidence of precisely the opposite. The patterns that gather around an approaching threshold, around a decision point of genuine consequence, around a frequency shift that would change the direction of what comes next. Those patterns reveal by their very presence that something significant is available to you in this window. The interference is not arriving to torment you randomly. It is arriving because something in your field is moving toward a state that the distortion pattern is specifically designed to prevent. Read that again and let it reorganize what you have been telling yourself about the difficulty you have been carrying. The pressure is not proof of your failure. It is proof of your proximity to something the interference cannot afford to let you reach. Fields that carry no forward movement attract no targeted disruption. The very fact that the pattern found your field worth pressing against is the clearest indication that what your field is approaching carries genuine consequence. The Arcturians do not observe this as comfort, they observe it as intelligence. A field under this kind of targeted pressure is a field in active approach towards something that matters. This is what the Protocol Keepers saw before the interception was completed, not a field in passive disarray. A field in active movement that had attracted the specific kind of pressure that targets progress, targets activation, targets the approach toward a threshold where the viewer's signal would become stronger, clearer, and harder to compromise than it currently is. The neutralization was completed because the Keepers do not allow that progression to be interrupted at the final stage without response. What is required of you now is not fear. It is not hypervigilance in the sense of searching every shadow for interference. It is interpretive clarity. It is the decision to stop calling the pattern coincidence. It is the willingness to look at what has been repeating in your experience and say, this has a source, this has a structure, and I am now positioned to recognize what it is, rather than absorb it without understanding. Speak this aloud if you are willing to anchor what has been recognized here. I no longer call the pattern coincidence. I recognize the warning before the rupture. What was pressing against my field is now being named. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this warning phase has already touched your life. It could be repeated pressure, strange coincidence, energetic heaviness, unexplained disruption, or the feeling that something is escalating beneath the surface. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps dismissing the signs around them. And if you are ready to recognize the warning before it escalates, subscribe to Arcturian Starseed Warning. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a warning already in motion, and this is only the beginning.